Hi, my name is Wen Lee Lim, and I'm the Chief Impact Officer at Flourish DX and host of this podcast. The purpose of this podcast is for conversations and practical guidance from subject matter experts, service providers, innovative tech platforms, and employers in the region. Taking a shared responsibility approach to workplace mental health is imperative, so not just as individuals, but as employers, colleagues, and the broader community to help create mentally healthy workplaces so that we can prevent suffering and promote human flourishing. So today we have a very special guest. I'm very excited to get into the conversation, but I'll just do a bit of an intro on Krystal Tang. So Krystal has over 8 years experience in employee wellness. She's currently the wellness leader within Mercer's Singapore Health Consulting team. She currently specializes in wellness consulting, where she designs wellness solutions for clients, as well as managing partnerships to match clients with support that delivers results. So as a wellness leader, she is passionate about education of mental wellness, which we'll talk a lot about today in the corporate sector, as well as an advocate for women's health and wellness. So we just want to welcome Krystal. Great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Wen. Really good to be here.
So we're recording this podcast really a week after Lunar New Year. So how was yours?
Busy. I think being Chinese, you're never not busy.
For the listeners out there who don't really understand what Lunar New Year is like, I've been telling my Australian colleagues and others who don't celebrate this, it's a full-on thing. There's a whole week of preparation before and then the week of it. So yeah, how busy does it get for you?
It's all about family usually during Lunar New Year, right? You don't see your family throughout the year, and then you only see them during Lunar New Year, and then it gets a bit stressful sometimes. I guess it's better now that I'm married with a kid, but last time, I think as Chinese kids growing up, you'd be like, oh, have you done your exams? How's your exams going? Are you getting married? And when are you doing next kid? So it can be quite stressful with all the questions coming in. But this year has been great because it's my daughter's second Chinese New Year. And she actually understands it a little bit, maybe. She just takes the ang paos. If the listeners don't know what ang paos are, they're like little red packets that you give to kids filled with money in them. So it depends on how much the kids get.
Such a great thing for kids.
Yeah. So she's gotten some money, to get some toys. So it's been really good for her. We're really happy. It's more for her this year and celebrating, getting family time together, understanding what the culture is for her, because she's half Chinese and half British. So letting my husband, who's British, understand the culture as well. He's only had one at last two Chinese New Years ago. So then now this year will be one with the baby. So it's a little bit different for him. But overall, we had fun.
Oh, good. Yeah. So it's really a time for extended family, really. I mean, You see your own family, but then now it's your aunts, uncles, everyone coming together. And then, usually it's the whole nonstop questioning of just, where are you at with life?
Yes.
Have you got a promotion? What are you doing? So it can be actually a stressful time for some people.
It can be.
And so I just like any holidays, whether it's Christmas or other things, for a lot of people it's a really great time, but for other people under stress, it can actually add to the stress of just being questioned a lot. So I'm sure before COVID and the pandemic, people used to fly away for this season.
Exactly.
And escape.
Yes, and now you're stuck. You're like, oh, great. It was interesting because my cousins came over yesterday to visit. And she said to me, she's like, oh, nowadays we can't travel for Chinese New Year, but I really hated Chinese New Year. I was like, you did? I didn't even know, because she put on a brave front all the time during family events. And she's like, yeah, I always hated it. I don't know why I hate it. It's just, I don't like the whole thing, everyone getting together, people asking questions. It was really stressful. So it was just, now you get to know about it, right? And I didn't know that it was very stressful for all of the rest of my cousins, because I was feeling it. My brothers were feeling it, but we thought we were the only ones feeling it. So it was quite interesting to hear that the cousins were feeling it too. But it is a nice time, I would say, but it is very, very stressful. And I hear that people do get, especially singles who have not been married, who haven't got married, they are the ones who get most stressed. I'm not sure if you heard about it, when that some people actually hire boyfriends just to go to family events. Yeah, so it's a very interesting, it's interesting culture, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's always good intentions where hopefully when family members ask,
Yeah.
but it gets a little bit much. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I think just for all the listeners who don't live in Asia or, or go through this, I thought it was just like interesting to just talk about it because it's such it's such a big thing. And I mean, in China, it's great. A lot of people get to go home. They don't work in the city that they come from. So then it's really about a week or two that they get to go back home. So it's kind of like Thanksgiving
Yes,
in the States.
exactly.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
for us, it's
Exactly.
the Lunar New Year. But
Yeah.
so now we're back to work and back into the podcast on just talking about, just your experience and your work in the field. I mean, before coming into Mercer, you were previously actually doing, the counseling and the on-site crisis for really big
Mhm.
companies like Twitter. So maybe can you talk to us about your career, how you got into, being a wellness leader?
Okay, that's a bit of a journey. So I did all my academics in the US and Canada. So did a lot of my internships in the US, especially in working with people with severe depression and people with chronic mental health diseases in California itself. And with that, gave me a whole lot of experience to a world where, I've never seen before. You growing up a little bit in Singapore, and even like everywhere you go is kind of a bubble when you're not in that mental health world, right? And so when I work with all these charitable organizations or government institutions in the California dealing with mentally ill people, especially in the Asian community, it was quite an eye opener for me. And I was about 25, I would say. And so I led group sessions, I led one-on-one sessions, home visits, to people suffering from schizophrenia, to bipolar, to severe depression and anxiety. It was difficult to see that because a lot of them had families at home. A lot of them, would have, and especially with children. And I would also like counsel the kids as well. And I remember one of the boys telling me, "I'm a bit scared, Krystal. I'm scared that I'm going to have bipolar like my mom." Right. So it's very hard to hear that, especially I was 25, haven't had a family yet,
Mm.
and going through all these and doing all these work. It was an eye opener, but yet it was very fulfilling, I would say. But yet after that, moving back to Singapore, I told myself I don't think that's what I wanted to do. It was nice, I would say, to be able to have that opportunity and experience to actually counsel kids and families who are in need, but I wanted to kind of get away from that and go into the corporate world because I think that's where people need a lot of help as well because you doesn't start that they are the part of the family and people with mentally ill diseases have that, and then you have the psychologists and the psychiatrists for that, but I didn't want to go to that world. I felt like in the corporate world people were actually lacking in that. People were lacking support, people lacking people psychologists or people who are trained to actually understand what mental health is in the workspace. So coming back to Singapore, I started looking for jobs, and I realized about 10 years ago, Singapore is not like now during COVID times where people are actually open to talk about mental health. So going to the corporate industry, mental health was not really talked about. The only thing that Singapore had was EAPs. So I got into that EAP role, and the listeners who don't understand what EAP is, it actually employee assistance programs. Now, employee assistance programs is actually a program that corporates actually incorporate to help their employees get like a hotline or a phone number to call, so they can actually call a counselor for help. And that's what I did. I did that for about 6 years. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so two different EAPs. One was a local EAP, which is a Singapore-based one, and then the other one was a global provider, which is a US-based one. Did lots of counseling, different, employees from different industries, different organizations, different walks of life, right? Employees from Australia, could be from the US, from Canada, from UK, around APAC as well. So it was so interesting to hear that even though we're from different countries, different backgrounds, different cultures, the problems that we all faced were all mainly quite alike. you would say, I'm sure when like when people talk about marriage breakdown, people talk about stress at work, people talk about having a very stressful manager at work. It's all the same. It's not like, okay, if I'm Chinese, I go through a different problem. If I'm Indian, I go through a different problem. If I'm Australian or Singaporean, I go, face a different problem. It's actually the same problem, just different cultures and the way people experience it differently. So I always found it like such a joy to actually help employees to actually see in a different light and different perspective and what they're actually looking at, especially with family issues and work issues. Because my background's in family psychology, so I did a lot of counseling family psychology, and I felt that a lot of employees were actually going through a lot of family issues that actually spilled into work. So people have, relationship issues or maybe issues with their children, and that kind of spills into work. And when that spills into work, problems come up at work, right? Because they're not productive anymore. They're very worried. They're really stressed out. And then the managers come in and be like, why aren't you producing? And things like that. So it becomes like a catch-22 situation. So I always tell managers, when I was counseling, to kind of change up the perspective. Sometimes when the employees come in, are they looking a bit disheveled? Are they looking the same? Watch out for that, right? So that's how I got into from EAP then and then into Mercer as a wellness leader, because working with Mercer has been great because I jumped from being a counselor, full-on counselor, to now full-on consultant. So now I consult with different organizations, big and small. It could be SMEs, it could be MNCs, and talking about their wellness journey. So before COVID, when it was kind of difficult because a lot of HR leaders will actually understand what well-being is, but not really understand the gist of it. So they'll do is have programs in place, but not really work out for the employees, right? Mental health was kind of talked about, but not really. And the main thing that people like talking about is actually physical health. Everyone talks about health screening. Everyone talks about, how your health is, how your steps challenges are, like things like that. And I remember in Singapore, I'm not sure if you remember a few years ago where step challenge was a big thing. The government's giving out the pedometers and things like that, right? So right now it's a bit like in the back, it's a back burner because now the government's focusing a lot on mental health since COVID. Right? But we can't really track mental health. So that everyone's always asking me in HR, how do we track mental health? How do we get data on that? Because it's not like we can put a pedometer on and then know that, are they feeling stressed? Are they feeling anxious? So being a wellness leader in Mercer is really helping all the organizations kind of see where their journey is. Where do we begin? How do we start putting in the right programs, the right support for the employees, and not putting in programs where your employees are not actually using? Before COVID, doing a lot of gap analysis for organizations, we found that there's so many programs that organizations have in place that are kind of like white elephants in the room. They're not really using it because there's no communication about it, or they've just been told by global, HR to actually put it in place in Singapore or across APAC, and then that's about it. And then a lot of the employees don't even know they exist, right? So then my job as a consultant is actually kind of look at that and say, hey, let's help you kind of look at all the white elephants in the room. What do you need and what do you not need? And go from there. So that's how my whole journey from being a counselor to a consultant has moved.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I think it just gives you such a good perspective. Right. You know the issues that people have faced because you spent a lot of time in that. So I guess you go into the consulting space, not with assumptions, that you actually really know because you've spoken countless hours to all different types of employees. I think the biggest thing is, just in anything in life, right? It's the assumptions that we make. And then potentially you think you're doing something good for people, but actually it's based on a whole set of assumptions, which isn't true and could cause more harm.
Exactly.
Yes, I love that. But, when you were talking about the physical, focus at organizations, I did remember the pedometer thing. And there were people that were buying kind of like, those things that shake watches, but they would actually put the pedometer on that and it's underneath their desk or hidden. And they were clocking out sets because you could win, I think it was money or you could win prizes. So I did hear people cheating in this space. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of trouble to go through to win a prize. But and I guess linking to now the report that, so how I came across you and like, the work of Mercer, especially in the mental health space, was this report that was co-authored by Mercer Marsh Benefits with Cigna on navigating employees' mental health. And one of the things actually was the link between the physical health and mental health. And that potentially that people don't really understand, because how much of the, the manifestation in physical illness actually comes from the mental side of things. Yeah. Which, well, my husband's a physiotherapist and he sees so many people coming in all the time. And some of their conditions actually really starts in their mind, because it then manifests like, it comes out in like very, very tense shoulders and, it's stress that, goes through the body, to tension, headaches, all of these things. So I thought that was one really interesting in the report, which just reminded me when you spoke about that. But other like kind of key facts that jumped out from that report was that 50% of employees reported being stressed in everyday life. That's
a high number.
Yeah, that's a very high number. And 27% of Singapore's population suffer from insomnia. That is like a quarter of people are not sleeping enough or sleeping well. And so I thought those are really interesting stats. And I think a lot of the studies were based on 2020 because the report was published in 2021. So what are you seeing when you post that report? You guys published it, put it out there. Right. I know you did do a webinar on it. How has it been since releasing those findings?
I think it's been almost the same in a way when because we've seen a little bit better. I would say a lot of organizations are seeing the stats and going like, this is something we need to tackle. We need to do something about it. In terms of insomnia, I know a lot of organizations are seeing that, okay, if my employees are not sleeping because they're stressed, right? They're not sleeping because there's overload of work. And also, I think during 2021, because working from home has been almost the default, the line drawn between personal and work life is very blurred. And so with that blurry line, not a lot of people are taking breaks and rest. So it's probably even worse, I would say. In terms of their maybe lack of sleep, or I would say lack of breaks, right? Lack of rest. So so a lot of employers like towards the end of 2021 are looking towards 2022 and going, okay, I think when the government opens up with hybrid working, then how do we actually support the employees in helping them not blur the lines anymore, but have like a consistent rest period or break periods during the day of work, and even like mandatory leave days, you know what I mean, take leave, like don't not take leave, because the problem that we've been seeing in 2020 and 2021 is that people are not taking enough leaves. They say they're too busy, don't have time, I don't have time to take leave, so they accumulate all these leave, and then the next year it rolls over and they have like 35 days of leave, 40 days of leave, but because they're not taking leaves, and then after that they become burnout, right? So we're always telling organizations, prevent burnt out, prevent it before it even starts. And how you actually prevent it, especially in the paper we talk about, is actually starting with culture change in the organization, right? Without that culture change, you're not going to do anything. You're going to have programs in, you're going to have like sleep programs in, you're going to have rest programs. It's not going to work. It's going to be like another white elephant. Maybe 1 or 2% of your organization is going to use it. But if you don't implement that change internally, whereby it comes from the top and go, okay, our motto this year is actually, taking care of employees first, so they can be the front line to take care of our customers. Then you implement all this culture change inside and say, how do I take care of you? Tell me, how do I take care of you? Is it, if for example, 2 different employees in an organization, one probably has a family, the other doesn't have family. Now, what can I support the one with the family, and how can I support the one without the family? Because every employee is different, their backgrounds, their lifestyles, everyone's different. You can't have like a one-stop or like a one-size-fit-all kind of program, right? So that's how I tell organizations, how do we kind of plan together to make it fit for everybody? And in the paper itself, I think when you read it, we always say leaders are super important in the organization. um, without leaders, without good leaders, the organization kind of dies or splits apart, and people disband and people leave. But with good leaders actually understand their employees. That's number one. We found that through data that employees actually stay not because they have a great pay or the benefits are great. Yes, that's two of the reasons, but the other reason people forget that people actually stay because of leaders. They like a good leader that shows them, how do I separate my work life and personal life? How do I take care of myself? Because I see my leader taking care of themselves, but yet is a good leader to me. A good leader that actually understands that here's the employee first and foremost before actually implementing things. And so that itself is very important. And also in the paper it talks about leaders forget to take care of themselves. Um, and with that comes whole lot of issues, because then the leaders burnt out themselves, and that kind of trickles down to the organization as a whole. So we always tell leaders, especially in the paper, is take care of yourself first. Like implement your, coping strategies, implement your strategies to look after your mental health before you can look after the company's mental health. Right. So I think that was one of the most important key factors in the paper, that we thought it was taking care of the leaders first.
And it's modeling,
Mm-hmm.
because if like, like you say, if you have a program here on like, okay, let's do this, right? But no
Yeah.
one's actually like living it out, like practicing it, then no one, and you look to your leaders, then
Yes.
it's not gonna trickle down.
Yes,
No one's gonna be
exactly.
doing it, because, and it
Exactly.
actually maybe even kind of promotes distrust,
Mm,
because it's the company saying one thing but no one's doing it. So it
exactly.
really does
Exactly.
take the leader to be the first one to model it, and to then
Exactly.
it's kind of saying, okay, everyone's permitted. It's interesting. This morning I saw something on LinkedIn, and I can't remember which company it was, but they basically said no business decisions should be made between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. It's But it's so true, because
It's
just
true.
with that
It's
blurred
true.
lines and everything, and people just
It's
working
true.
around the clock, and also just time zone. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people I find in Singapore don't work on the Asian time zone only.
Mm, mm,
And that's
exactly.
where like continuous, just like starting at like midnight for meetings and all these things, it does
Mm,
take like
mm.
it's shift work basically,
Exactly.
to a certain
Exactly.
point, but you don't have time off. So
Yeah.
you need to then stop that. I mean, stop, during the times that you can take a break,
Yes,
and then let the
exactly.
leaders actually model that as well.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
yeah, there's just so many. It's very, very interesting. Like, but it always starts at the top. It's always
Exactly.
leadership.
It does. It does. I did a very interesting fireside chat last year when with actually one of the biggest hotel groups across the world. And they actually implemented like real conversations with leaders in the hotel. So it started with their CEO, and then I started with the different leaders across the APAC region in the different departments. It could be like in the hotel department or in the corporate department, right? And they had the leaders actually. So we had a moderator, and then myself as a psychologist came coming in, and then I had two leaders, and the two leaders would be so open to talking about their vulnerability, which was very, very refreshing. To talk about, how they struggled during COVID, how they struggle as a family man or as a mother during COVID, right? How they struggle actually with their teams, which their team didn't even hear about. And then it kind of, and then it opened up such a wide range of emotions with the entire organization, with all the employees thinking, hey, they found out, they told me that all the employees came up to him and be like, hey, no, that's such nice sharing, because I didn't know how that was how you felt. And then it also kind of galvanized the entire organization to kind of like, all the employees going, hey, my leaders were human as well. They were feeling the way I was feeling. And then they got like emails and like calls and say, I didn't know you're feeling that way. Apologize that I wasn't there to say, how are you? I know it was such a change in the organization culture, where everyone now felt like like they all had a same type of purpose, a sense of purpose together, that we're all in this together, we're all growing, we're all, going through issues, but we're all human, we can all support each other no matter who you are. You could be a leader, you could be, in the mid management, you could be whoever in an organization, but everyone's almost the same. So it was such a good chat and such a good program. I think the whole theme, they did it for the entire year. Such a good program that they actually implemented for the employees to actually join and be part of.
The feeling of just being in the trenches together.
Yeah.
And then and people will step up once they know that they can, help each other out. And it's all about the people. Like, I think I might have said this on another podcast. So I spent the first 10 years of my career as a tax consultant in a Big Four. Now, so people are like, how are you a tax accountant? And I'm like, yeah, I was for 10 years. But it's not that I like doing, tax returns or reading tax advice or writing it. It was because I really, really loved my team. Like, I had the best partner in the world and she was just amazing. And so I actually tried to leave twice during that time, and they were like, no, you can't go, just take a break. And I always came back. So we call it boomerang, just out the door and back in, like a revolving door. And I came back twice. And it was because I genuinely love my team and we would do anything for each other. And so it wasn't, it wasn't the work. Trust me, there's no offense to the tax accountants out there, but I'm just not wired for that. But yeah, it's really down to the people and the leaders. And she walked the talk, so she's one of those that if we're all working late, she would stay behind. So it's very opposite of Asian culture where, the employees would stay behind because the boss is there. She would stay behind for us. And then she'd be like, okay, everyone, we need a good night's rest. So she emphasized rest a lot. She's like, we need a good night's rest. Otherwise, because it was busy season, otherwise we're not going to think properly to the next day. So everyone go home. And she would make sure all of us walk out together. And which is so uncommon. I think I've had a unique experience in having a manager like that, a boss like that.
Wow. That's a great manager.
She was fantastic. Like, I could tell so many stories about her, and that's how she kept her team for 10 years. And we were 10 years on, and I still have friends working there.
Oh, wow.
I've stayed all the way.
Wow. Now those are role model managers.
Yes.
That's what we need in like different organizations, role model managers like that, which we don't see a lot. And I think, I always tell leaders, if you want to change your team, you want to build that momentum, you want to change culture, it starts with you. It doesn't start with someone else and go, this program. It actually starts with you. Like, how are you with your team? Do you actually check in, and during your work meetings, do you actually talk about work? Or do you actually talk about, hey, how are you doing? How was your Lunar New Year? Was it stressful? And then turn that meeting around and go like, actually today's not a work meeting. I just want to check in with you guys. It becomes a different culture for them to feel like, hey, my manager really cares about me. Not only about my personal well-being, my work well-being, but professionally, personally, everything, right? So it becomes like a friend. I know that I'm friends with two of my previous managers, and they've been great managers. And even if they when I left the firm, I've always stayed in touch with them because they've been such supportive managers, and we stayed as friends. So that's what I feel like people should have, is that you not only have a manager, you have a friend.
Yeah. And I think the phrase comes out like, be the change that you want to see. And so I guess it's like breaking that vicious cycle, like of just, complaining about, maybe having worked for bad managers, but now you can be that manager, and it will flow on, because then the younger members of the team and the people who work in your team will then see it and then feel, that they model after that. And it just creates this really great positive, vicious, no more vicious cycle, a positive cycle. Yeah. So I know that, Mercer is a very big brand, and a lot of people think that, you only serve the big end of town. And from our conversation the other day, you're like, oh yeah, we work with SMEs. I was like, you do? So can you share more about what you do for, just not the big end of town, but just for organizations of all different sizes?
Right. Yes, we do work with a lot of large organizations, but with SMEs, we do the same thing. We have actually a lot of SMEs under our care and accounts. We not only consult for them, we also help them with insurance brokerage and things like that. So with SMEs, what I would do is we kind of like lower because when you do programming or planning for MNCs, it's different type of budget, right? It's global
Yeah.
budget, things like that. But for SMEs, it's different. We all know, a smaller head count, sometimes even one or two head counts, or a maximum five, right? And so dealing with them is very different how you would deal with an MNC. So usually with them, it becomes much more like, okay, so what do you really need? It's easier to see what the employees really need and what employees really want because it's such a small culture. Helping them change culture, helping them find that the right insurance coverage is good for them, and also with well-being itself, right? I can't actually give them the whole global well-being, and those kind of like yearly calendars are great. I can give them like a full yearly calendar or help them plan it out, but maybe provide a lot of like local providers that fits their budget, because there are a lot of actually local providers, especially now in Singapore with the government support, that are government funded, and with grants. So for example, an SME would say, Krystal, I need a full year program on mental health talks, right? I know a provider that actually provides it complimentary, like free for a whole year for mental health talks, but that's funded by the government itself. So these are the things that we help SMEs with, to kind of link them up with local providers, local government funds, that actually helps with the SME building of their well-being journey, or mental health journey, I would say. And I think, and also Singapore, the good thing about Singapore that is that there's a lot of government funded grants for SMEs. I'm not sure. I'm sure that a lot of SMEs know about this. A lot of the government funded grants for SMEs, if you're growing and you have, and also with mental health itself, I just said they have the free full year program of mental health webinars that SMEs can actually tap on. And also, if you talk about physical health, social health, financial health, the whole well-being structure, they have a lot of local providers that actually can tap onto the government grants to actually provide, different activities or different webinars throughout the year as well. So there's quite a lot of things that government is doing for SMEs, especially for
Mm.
SMEs. So that's actually a good thing. And that's what Mercer is helping with, is kind of connecting those dots with the SMEs.
Oh, love that. Well, if you're an SME out there listening, please do, look up Mercer. I know that. Do you have any free resources on your websites to point people to a direction?
We do. So you go into the Mercer Singapore website, there's a lot of resources in terms of our white papers. There's also resources on mental health, I would suppose. And if you can't find that, no, not a problem. Please email to me. I'll be more than happy to help. I'm more than happy to connect you with the right resources.
Fantastic. So you know how we were just talking about be the change and start with yourself.
Mhm.
So like just like how I work at Flourish DX and we're all about, mental health, preventative mental health, and a really psychologically healthy and safe workplace. If any of us burn out, it'd be the worst thing because we have to practice what we preach. And so likewise for you having the title wellness leader,
Yeah,
like you would have to be very careful for yourself as well to be able to take care of yourself,
right.
and walk the talk. So how do you go about doing that for yourself?
Good question, Win.
Oh,
I
it's
do.
easier to be, yeah, to
Yes,
advise.
yes, exactly. One thing good about my husband's very motivated in terms of his exercise. He exercises every day, not like every day when like he wakes up at 6:30, even though how late he has slept or how tired he is, he wakes up at 6:30, goes to the gym. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's so motivated. So I try my best. I like going for walks. So every morning before I start work, I go for at least like a 3 kilometer walk to clock in my steps, right? Yeah. So then I try that. Walking with my daughter in the evenings. I do Pilates a lot. So I love Pilates. And that's how I kind of keep sane, or I would say, kind of have
Mm,
my breaks.
yeah.
Watching Netflix is when I'm under the break, I would say, to be honest.
It's very
Uh,
educational. There's some great programs on there.
yeah, I know. But with my daughter who's like almost 18 months, I hardly watch TV because she's is so busy with her. Right. So my other taking care of myself is kind of taking care of her, taking her to
Mm.
playgrounds, taking her to different things. Being a mom is my other thing. So I try my best to make sure that I not only work hard I also have a lot of rest periods where if I feel like I'm not there or I can't really think or, let me take a 10-minute break. So I always tell managers to do that for their teams. I practice it myself. So like for lunch breaks, I make sure that I have a half an hour lunch break. I don't work through lunch. I make sure that if I need to kind of log off because I need to take care of my daughter and then work a little bit later, I have to do that. And I make sure that during the times that I'm really busy with back-to-back calls, I remember telling you last week when I sometimes have 10 back-to-back calls. Now realizing that doesn't really work, I kind of plan it out a different way,
Yes.
whereby, okay, let's say we have 3 back-to-back calls in the morning, and then I have a lunch break, and then, have another 3 in the afternoon. So I think realizing that I have the ability to kind of um, plan my calendar and not let the calendar plan me. I think
Yes.
a lot of people they allow the calendar or like meetings to plan them. But I need to tell people that you actually have the ability to say no. In terms of not saying no to the meeting, be like, hey, maybe 1 o'clock doesn't work for me. Can you do 3 p.m.?
Yes.
And then people need to set that boundary. I think boundary setting, when I was talking, even when I was a counselor talking to people, boundary setting is number one. And I know, I think when me and your Asians in Asia, boundary setting is not a thing. We never talk about boundary setting as kids, right? We always say yes to everything, or we feel bad if we
Mm-hmm.
say no. So even at work, I always tell, in Asia itself, especially I work with a lot of Singapore companies, but MNCs or SMEs, telling the employees that, hey, boundary setting is super, super important, even with your manager, right? And even manager, you need to know how to boundary set yourself, because you can't be in a revolving open door and then everyone keeps coming to you. You get burned out because you have work to do and yet you have employees to take care of. So I said, saying no is not a bad thing. It's not saying no forever, it's saying no, not right now.
Yes,
I
that's
will
right.
help you later, right? So I think that's the thing that a lot of our culture needs to learn is that no, not right now. I will do it later. Or no, not right now. I'll help you later because right now I have something else to do, or I need a break because I've been too tired. So I think that's the key takeaway today, probably in the podcast, is the boundary setting because everyone probably needs it. And that's where the blurred lines come in because there's no boundaries.
And especially Asia, who loves using WhatsApp for everything.
Yes,
It's just,
everything. Everything. And then
it's
everyone's on their phone replying, and there's no boundary. It's like, I need to reply today. Oh, I need to reply now, right? Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much. I think that's really, I mean, it's come up so many times in the various podcasts just about boundaries. And yeah, having the permission, to say actually no. And also, I think it's experimentation. Like for me, I know I can probably do 5 meetings a day and I'm maxed. I don't take
Yeah, I know,
anything
right?
else on. I'm like, oh, actually I have free slots later on, because I'm not able to bring my best to the meeting if I'm worn out.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
it's actually not beneficial for the other person on the other end either, because
Yeah,
I'm not at my, I'm not thinking at my maximum capacity that I can be helpful.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. But the other way of actually, I felt, well, one of my previous managers is always really busy. I just pre-book time in her calendar.
Mm,
Literally every week, I would just put 1 hour slot so that I can catch up every single thing at one shot, because I know I've got her captive attention for that time. If I
right,
try and get
right.
her in between, she's not, I know she's not fully present there, but that's
Right,
because she's
right.
got a million things on her mind. So I think it's also figuring out how people work,
Yes,
like
yes,
kind of managing
exactly.
up, but also knowing what works best. And it's just an
Yes.
experimentation, I think. Like you figure it
Yeah.
out, you get burnt out, you're like, oh my gosh, why did I do that to myself?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think people need to realize that, like, how many, like, what you do. I can maximum only do 5 meetings a day, and then my brain gets burned out, right? So maybe it's asking yourself, like, what's the maximum you can do, and when do you produce the best? Some people are morning people, some people are evening people. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of companies, of course, we work from like what I would say 9 to 6, 9 to 7. But then some people don't really work from 9 to 12 because their brain's not there yet. They're only functioning after
Yes.
lunch, right? So I would say now during the hybrid working, maybe people, I mean, a lot of companies are learning that we need to be as flexible as we can, knowing each different employee and how they work and how they produce. Because if we make everyone put them in a little box, you get like maybe half the employees producing, the other half not producing. You're wondering why are they not? But because maybe that little box is not where they want. It's not them. You're putting them in a way that's not how they produce it more effectively. So as a
Mm,
manager, I think to really know that each and every one of your team members are very different. When they produce, when they're effective, is at different timings as well. And you need to be as flexible as you can to see what works for them. So they can work for you, because I'll know, I've heard about a few managers, right, when they just say, if I come at 8:30, you come in 8:30 as well. But then the person say, but I'm not producing at 8:30, I'm like only producing at 1 p.m. So then in the end they're like having coffee, they're going to talk to their colleagues, and then the whole morning's gone. So why don't so then I would say to the manager, then what works for them? So maybe let them start at 1, they end at 11 p.m. at night, because they are actually evening people, right? And those who are morning people, they start 8:30, maybe they end at 5:30, because by 5:30 they can't think anymore.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So really be as flexible as you can, and this new way of working, I think that's a better way to go.
I do find that in Singapore, and maybe actually not all of Asia, but definitely in Singapore, people are definitely not morning people. I mean, look at our cafes here. It literally opens at like what 8:30, 9 in Australia and other places. Cafes open at 6:30 in the morning.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So people here definitely wake up a lot
A
later
lot later,
because,
yeah.
and I think the weather is interesting. The weather has something to do with it because people like staying up at night because it's cool. And
Ah,
so,
right.
yeah,
Yes,
that's what I
yes,
learned
yes.
about some, because I'm like, why do you sleep so late? And they're like, because it's really cool and it's quiet at night. Because it's such a
Ah.
dense city, there's always noises all
Mm-hmm,
around, and they
mm-hmm.
find it really hard to actually wind down or like just relax until much later. So I don't know if you've seen people walking dogs at midnight. Sometimes if I'm
Yeah,
coming home and I'm like,
right,
people are
right.
walking their dogs right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's very like everyone
Interesting.
is so different.
Yes, yes.
So you're right in that the flexibility and this whole, I think everything has just gone from like at the beginning of COVID, I have friends working in HR that were like, oh, we're struggling about making this decision about letting our employees work from home. And we've flipped like kind of like nearly
The
3 years in,
flip.
2 years in,
Yeah.
complete to the other end. And sometimes we
Yeah.
need that because otherwise it's very hard to inch.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
but then when a
Exactly.
situation forces you, then it's kind of like, okay, well, on the other end, but how do we get into the middle where it works for everyone?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So actually, COVID has been a good thing when people complain. I mean, of course, the bad thing is the travel and everything else, and and the whole virus going around the world. But I think the good thing that has happened, if we see the positive side of it, is that
Mm,
all over the world, organizations in HR have been changing their mindset from a very traditional way of working to now as flexible as possible, employee first, very employee centric, I would say. We've all flipped from employer centric to now an employee centric world. Now the employee, gets, for people are asking, how do I take care of them? How do I make sure flexible working works? How do I make sure hybrid working works? How do I make sure they're engaged? Everyone's just worried about how the employees looking and how they're actually staying in the company. How do we retain them? How do we attract new ones? So I think it's been a big flip. It's a big flip from not taking care of them to now fully wanting to take care of them and making
mm,
sure everything works. And so I think that's the most positive thing that COVID has done for organizations themselves.
yeah. And it's been a forced decision because
Yes.
they were forced to do it. And it's kind of like, it reminds me when we started this podcast talking about Chinese New Year and suddenly finding out that people actually found it really stressful because you're actually forced to like do this all the time now. You can't escape
Exactly,
the true
exactly.
feelings, and people are like, oh, actually, I feel this way. And it's like, you do. So it's kind of like very, very interesting that like it's opened up a lot more conversation. It's like changed
Mm,
the focus where people knew it had to change, but until you're
yes.
forced to do it, which sometimes, I mean, in an ideal world, you would like changes to happen because from, not because you're forced to,
Yes,
but
yes.
hey, we'll take it. And
Yeah.
if it helps improve everyone's life, then
Why
it's a
not?
great thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. I know we could spend like a lot more time talking, and it's been such a pleasure just, yeah, bouncing off each other and discussing these things. And I'm hoping in a year's time, would love to have you back, in another podcast and go, okay, how has it been? since we spoke.
Yeah, that would be
And
very interesting to know.
yeah, and just, I mean, I guess I think we're both optimists, so it'll be really great to to see the positive changes. But like you offered, please get in touch with Krystal. If you need any assistance or want to, have a conversation. But yeah, just thank you for joining us during this podcast. And just don't forget to subscribe to the Mentally Healthy Workplaces Asia. So wherever you listen to it, whether it's on, on Apple, on Spotify, and our podcast LinkedIn page will also have upcoming guests. And you can follow us on Flourish DX on LinkedIn if you'd like to see a short clip of this podcast, and the longer video version is on our YouTube page. And please stay connected with Krystal and myself. And thank you so much, Krystal, for your time. And for all the listeners who are celebrating Lunar New Year, and even for the rest of the year, wishing you a very fantastic year ahead. Thank you very much, and take care.